Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Empowered Educator. I hope you had an amazing week. Mine was busy, really busy, and I felt like it moved pretty slowly. However, it's Labor Day weekend as I'm recording and releasing, and this is a time of year. I know you barely get started into school if you have started, and we get this day off, but let me just say it is such a needed day. I don't know about y'all, but we're seeing at our school, and I've seen this year after year, illnesses are ramping up. Everybody's back in a contained space. And so the germs are there. Everybody's working extra hard to get the school year started and then to get back into the groove and maybe not taking care of ourselves as we typically do. I've been very lucky, knock on wood, that I have not gotten sick and I typically don't get sick, but I see it happening in students and in adults. So I definitely say drink your water, take your vitamins, take some zinc or some elderberry. I believe in that. Drink your vitamin C, do your things because the struggle is definitely real. I also have been noticing in these last 3 weeks that we've been in school, we really have been focusing on making sure we have everything set to have a successful school year. And that's exactly how I designed my years to start when I was a principal and as a classroom teacher. We've been working with our teams to ensure that we have set our expectations. We've communicated the expectations. We're building the relationships. We're ensuring that we're not wasting time in our day, that as I spoke about last week, we're really utilizing every minute of instructional time so that we're setting that stage of what the rest of the year is going to look like. Because I told somebody this the other day, going from, and we hit an 89 at our school for our overall rating. An 89 is the highest score in a B that you can get. And we're shooting next year to be over 90, or this year to be over 90. However, the skill set that it takes to go from a D, an F, C campus up to a high B campus is one thing. And the skill set that goes from that 89 over the hump to 90 is completely different. It definitely is. And I've been there a bazillion times, right? And so it's important to get these things right at the beginning of the year. It's also the time of year where you want to be sure that all of your systems are in place, everybody's aware of them, and they're working. And parents know exactly what is to be expected as well. When I led schools, they were mainly elementary schools. I had a year of working with a middle school as well, but I mainly worked in elementary. But now working in a middle school, I know parent communication is a bit different than what we did in elementary, but I also feel like as a parent as well, it's so important. It's so important that we make sure that parents know you are there to care about their kids, that we have a system in place, and these are our non-negotiables. These are our priorities, and this is how we get your child, mom or dad or grandma or whoever the guardian is, to that highest level of success. And I think that we forget some of that sometimes. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. What I'm here to talk about today is one more thing that I'm starting to see that I want to be sure I am focused on over the next week with my team that I work with to ensure that we get this right. And this is not going to be an overnight fix and it won't be for anybody, but I think it's time we really start thinking about what does the actual instructional process look like? I feel like since we have made so many adjustments in the United States in particular, and mainly in Texas, because that's where I work, of adopting these curriculums that are scripted out for teachers. And let me just say, I have had the experience as a teacher to use a scripted, already planned out for me curriculum when I was a teacher. Going to this, and so many districts are being encouraged to go to this, right? And I know it is across the United States, not just here. Our lesson planning process definitely one, needed to change, but two, has changed to where I feel we're missing some components. When I took over my last school, it was on the east side of Houston. It was a school that was within a district that was fairly small and growing. I remember sitting down for the interview. So I had an online interview and then I had an in-person interview. And I remember sitting on this in-person conversation, and the superintendent was telling me how they anticipated that the district would increase enrollment by 4,000 students over the next 10 years. And that's a big number. And the reasoning was property is kind of a hot commodity in the Houston area, right? We are big and we continue to grow, but we continue to spread. And this area that the school district was located hadn't really been fully developed yet. So we knew it was coming. We also knew that as a small district, resources are much more limited. And also as a small district, and I'm sure you've experienced this in districts all over the world, people don't tend to leave their positions as easily. It's almost as if I'm comfortable here. People know me. I know everybody. And you do. You get to know everybody in the surrounding area, and you just tend to stay. And we were kind of going through a shift when I came on board because one superintendent hired me. She announced her retirement the night that I was announced as the new principal of this school. And an interim principal went into play for 6 months for the first semester. And then another superintendent came on board. So it was just a whole revolving door for that first year. And the first couple of years, things were just kind of going in all kinds of different directions. And people were feeling that they were getting some pretty heavy power that maybe were not in positions of power. And so what ended up happening is that for years, and mainly the reason why this district was struggling was that they were providing teachers with scripted lessons, and these lessons were created by instructional specialists or instructional coaches who did not have enough experience to be able to provide effective lessons for all these grade levels. So for example, I had a first through fifth grade on that campus, and my instructional coach for reading had only taught fifth grade. Now let's just think this through. If you're a fifth grader, or you're a fifth grade teacher, sorry, not a fifth grader, fifth grade teacher, what do you know about the reading process? You may not know much, but here you are designing lessons for first grade teachers to get kids to read. Didn't know this coming in, but learned it very quickly as my assistant principal and I had sat in a couple of the first planning sessions and really saw that teachers were actually going through this process. So if this is a process that your school has adopted, I have to tell you, this is probably why you are not hitting your goals. Teachers would sit in a circle. The instructional coach would come in and say, okay, y'all, I have your lessons for next week. Pass out the papers. It was typed up papers. And the teachers would say, okay, do we have anything big going on for the week? And the coach would say, no, just follow the lesson plan. And they would scatter. Now, I get that you want more time in your day. I get that nobody wants to just sit and especially have an unproductive meeting that is not going to produce any results. But I also know that my teachers were not internalizing these lessons. And I could see the evidence as soon as we walked into these classrooms. For myself, it worked out because I don't believe that that is an effective way to lesson plan. And if you are in a district where it is required for you to follow a scripted lesson, there is a specific way to internalize these lessons and be sure that you're still delivering high quality instruction. and that you're hitting every component of the instructional process. So let's talk about what that is, because I don't know if anybody now, especially newer people, 10 years or less going into a classroom, has had the kind of training that some of us that have been in the classroom 20 to 30 years have had. And I know this to be a fact because I sat down with my team a couple of weeks ago and I asked them what institutes an effective lesson cycle. And I'm going to be honest, this is what I heard. Well, we tell kids what they're going to learn. We read through the materials that are provided to us and we give them an exit ticket. And I said, then how are your exit tickets looking? How are students performing? And there was a lot of mixed responses. I heard things from, well, right now everything is review, it's easy, so they're doing fine. Okay. So what happens when the rigor increases? I heard things from, my kids are already struggling, and we haven't even really got into the depth of the curriculum. And my follow-up question is, okay, what's going to happen when we do get into the depth? What I find is missing so much, and I just wrote about this in my blog this week. It's something I'm talking about at my school. It is something that is heavy on my mind right now, and it's going to be part of my trainings this month in the Uncommon platform, and that is the teacher input piece. And actually, it's not even the teacher input piece alone. It's the entire lesson cycle. So what are those components? I follow the Madeline Hunter lesson cycle, which I think, yes, this is 30 years ago that I was trained on this, but it is very effective. And you can utilize this to plug your pieces from your scripted curriculum. You need to start with a hook. What's going to get kids excited about what they're going to learn for the day? And if you wanted to translate that into modern language right now, that's your do now. What are you doing the moment kids come into the room to get them set up for instruction? That's your hook. It could be a conversation. It could be an activity. It could be a review. It doesn't matter what it is, but it needs to be something that's going to get their minds together and get them ready to learn your content. Then, of course, you need to tell kids what they're learning and why they're learning it. So what are your objectives for that day and why are these important to students? I see a lot of people reading these objectives and they're reading them in adult objective language, and kids do not understand what that means. So how are you breaking down what you're teaching them and telling them why they have to know it? Because I promise you, a high achieving GT ADHD student like Sherry Dixon was, I was afraid of my dad, so I wasn't going to get in trouble in school. But in my mind, every time the teacher said, this is what we're going to learn today, and if they didn't tell us why, I asked, and why do I need to know this? And you have kids like me out there in your classes. The next component is what you teach students, the teacher input. Reading from just a story is not teaching. Reading from just a set of instructions on how to do a paper is not teaching. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be a little bit pushy right now, and this is going to make some people upset, but just modeling a problem isn't teaching. Kids need to understand the skill, and we have to be able to teach them the skill. Does it have to be a super long instructional piece? No. It can be 3 to 5 minutes. Go on to practice, come back if you need to, but maybe on your more difficult processes, it needs to be 5 to 7 to 10 minutes. You want to consider how old your kids are, and you also want to consider how difficult this skill is going to be, because once you've taught, you need to then see, are they hearing and understanding what I've taught? And that comes with guided practice. What I love about the way I set up my instructional plan was that I taught a little, we practiced a little. I reviewed their practice, we gave some feedback, I pulled back and I had to maybe reteach some things. I wasn't perfect, or maybe then I could move on to the next component. That's your autonomy in the classroom. You get to do that. This part may include the reading and analyzing. It may include the working through some problems and you watch and see how they do it. But don't forget about the teacher input piece first. I still work with students that I tutor one-on-one, and they come to me because they're struggling students. They don't know what they don't know, but most times they don't know a whole lot. And a lot of it is because they've been taught how to work problems, but they haven't been taught the skill. And then you need to move to some kind of independent practice. And I think that that's probably needs to come before you do some kind of an assessment. Now, I know time is a precious commodity, and you may not have time for an independent practice and an exit ticket, but let me tell you what I would do. I would teach the skill, go into guided practice where students work with partners or at their tables, their groups, and I would do this in any grade. And I stand by that for sure. And then I would go over a review or a reteach or adding anything new I needed to add, right? Going on to the next thing, follow that same kind of cycle. And then I would have students do a problem or do a task on their own, review it for accuracy before I sent them to the exit ticket. And before I even sent them to the exit ticket, once I knew that independent practice showed me that most of my students knew what they were doing, I would close up. This is what we learned today, boys and girls. This is why we're learning it. Tell me, did you learn this today? All right, what I'm seeing is this, and this. Doing a great job. We're ready for our exit ticket. Let's go into it and let's go. That exit ticket then becomes the grade for the day. Now, this is a very basic overview of what I mean when I talk about all of this. And of course, you can definitely get more from me on this, which I've done a very extensive amount of work in this area, both as a teacher and as a school leader, supporting my teachers to ensure that this is moving in the right direction. And it is one of the biggest leverages for change, for increased student performance. So if you feel like you need more, I do invite you to come into the Uncommon platform. This is one of the topics that I'll be releasing in September, and I'll be going into deep detail on this because it's so important. It's so important, y'all. But if we're not going through this entire process and digging deep into what is happening, we are at the surface and our kids are never going to be able to perform at the level of rigor that our states and our countries expect them to perform. So, having said all that, go out there and start looking at your lessons differently. Take one piece to start with. How am I introducing the objective? What is my hook? How am I closing out the lesson before they go into the exit ticket? Take one piece. Focus on revising that one piece to start, because I promise you, I have done the work. I have the data to show when you get this right, you will see a change in your students' performance. All right, y'all, I hope you have an amazing week. I am still working hard on the Empowered Teacher Certification Academy. We just got some information from the State Department that some things are changing. So I'm having to go back and do some revisions, but this is going to be an amazing program for people out there who want to become teachers, or for those that have been teaching, but they're not quite certified yet. If you feel like you want to support my program, I am doing a fundraiser right now to collect money to help me be able to afford the very high cost of submitting the program. So go to the show notes and the link, and you can donate. You can purchase items. Every dollar counts. Every dollar counts. So I would appreciate it. All right, y'all. Have an amazing next week. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend, and I'll see you all next week right back here on the Empowered Educator podcast.